Otters here wanting to tell you a bit about the difference between the Viet Minh, the North Vietnamese Army, which I'm going to call the NVA from now on, the Vietcong, and then the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, which I'm going to call the ARVN, because that's what they do in the book. So first of all, we've got the Viet Minh, who were created by this guy, who goes by the name of Ho Chi Minh, or Ho Chi Minh, whatever you like. Anyway, he created the Viet Minh to try to expel foreign influence from Vietnam. He wanted an independent Vietnam. First off, they wanted to expel Japanese influence, which was the country which took over Japan during the Second World War. And the Japanese treated the Vietnamese even more harshly than their previous conquerors, the French, who ran French Indochina, which included Laos and Cambodia. When the Second World War was done and the Japanese had been beaten, the French came back to Vietnam, and the Viet Minh decided to try to fight them and tried to expel them from Vietnam, which they did in the aftermath of a big battle known as Dien Bien Phu. And here you can see some demoralised French soldiers in the aftermath of Dien Bien Phu. Demoralised, upset and rather cheesed off because they've been beaten by the Viet Minh. Hurrah! Great victory for the Vietnamese. After Dien Bien Phu, the French wanted out, so they decided to come to a peace conference to have serious talks with the Viet Minh, with Ho Chi Minh and the people around him. And for the first time, Vietnam would officially be known as independent. Unofficially, they weren't independent really at all. Here are some of the decisions made at the Geneva Peace Conference. So this is what the map looked like, the map of Vietnam after the Geneva Peace Conference. They decided to temporarily split Vietnam into North Vietnam, which was run by Ho Chi Minh, communist-led, and of course his army would go and locate in North Vietnam. In the south would be a capitalist government, the heavily backed Ngo Dinh Diem. I say heavily backed because he was heavily backed by the United States, and in the south Ngo Dinh Diem ruled. There's another important part of this map which we need to mention, and that's the 17th parallel, that bit in the middle of the map in between North and South Vietnam, where officially no soldiers were allowed to tread. It was supposed to divide the country for those 2 years, until 1956 when elections were scheduled. Elections, however, that didn't end up happening, but that's for another slide. That's for another show. So back to the differences. What is the difference, first of all, between the Viet Minh and the NVA? Well, the answer is there is very little different. They both wear uniforms. They are both an army. They are both largely or massively communist. And they both want to get rid of capitalists from the country. The big difference is this year, 1954, because this body of people before the Geneva Peace Conference, i.e. before Vietnam was split, would be known as the Viet Minh. However, when North Vietnam, the country of North Vietnam, was created, they had their own army, known as, surprisingly, the North Vietnamese Army. So when you see the Viet Minh referred to in books, they're usually talking about before 1954. After 1954, it would be the NVA. So then, what are the differences between the NVA and this force called the Vietcong? Well, looking at the map, the NVA, they were based in the north. They had their army bases in the north, and very rarely did they venture south. And the Vietcong, which were communist sympathisers that lived in the capitalist-run south, who were prepared to fight the capitalists to try to kick them out of the country. Now here's perhaps the biggest difference between the North Vietnamese Army and the Vietcong. And here you can see the North Vietnamese Army, all with uniforms, with their guns, with their weapons, but if you took away their weapons, they would still look like soldiers. On the other side, we've got a member of the Vietcong. Now if you took his gun away from him, he would look just like any other South Vietnamese peasant. That means he could shoot at an American, run away, drop his gun and blend in with a village, which made things very difficult for the Americans and the Army of the Republic of Vietnam when they were trying to catch these Viet Cong. There is a big difference in trying to find somebody with a uniform compared to somebody without a uniform. So in summary, to begin with, you've got the Viet Minh, who tried to expel from the country the Japanese And then the French. When Vietnam is divided, the Viet Minh go to the north, where they are known as the NVA. Down in the south, the capitalists have their own army, called the Army of the Republic of Vietnam. And finally we've got the Viet Cong, which are a sneaky army who are capable of blending back in with the villagers, who were able to hide very well. And they were prepared to take on the Army of the Republic of Vietnam. They fought in the south. And they also were the force which ended up fighting against the Americans, against the United States, when they arrived to try to liberate the South Vietnamese from the communists. So that was the difference between the communist armies of the Viet Minh, the North Vietnamese army and the Viet Cong, and the capitalist army of the Republic of Vietnam. Bye!